Welcome to Fish Out of Water. Who makes water systems? Over the centuries, people constructed buildings and landscapes for and with water as they adapted to local climates. Local communities have been stewards of water systems, creating a spatial network, institutions, and cultural imaginations. The Dutch water boards are an excellent example. Already in the 12th century, people in what is today the Netherlands created institutions to manage water. Building a dam on the old Rhine to control water led to problems upstream, and the request to install a sluice to facilitate drainage. By 1255, the so-called Heemraden started to oversee the dikes in the Netherlands. An official, the dijkgraaf, the chair of the water board, was in charge of maintenance. In 1255, Count Willem II granted permission to the dike wardens to levy a toll on ships that passed through the sluice, as depicted in the painting by Caesar van Everdingen. Decisions about where and how dikes and dams were built and where water could be let out into the rivers and seas was important to keeping the Netherlands dry and to creating the great polders on which much of the country is built. Charters granted to the water boards were key to developing sluices and dams. Use of water for energy or for drying out the polders could lead to conflicts. The wool mill, pictured here, used water to create energy. However, the water continuously flowed back into the polder, and it took several windmills to drain the polder again. Debates about how to solve this water-related problem went on for several centuries. The mill was built in 1631, but a solution to the issue was only found in 1869. Specific professions and lifestyles developed with these typical Dutch practices. Millers lived with their families in the mills, such as the world-famous Kinderdijk, to maintain the mills and orient them towards the wind as needed. Entire families lived in tight quarters in the mill. With industrialization and the development of the nation-state, new technologies emerged, replacing earlier, more labor-intensive ones. The Wisboom pumping station first worked with steam and later with electricity, pumping out as much water as 8 windmills. New professions and decision-makers emerged, each with their own, often very specific goals and new scales of water management. As lifestyles evolved and communities changed, historic buildings and landscapes were adapted, destroyed, or became heritage. Amsterdam is a good example. The historic canal district, with its concentric arcs and radial waterways and streets, was largely preserved and turned into a tourist destination. With the advent of the car came new plans for the historic city. The American traffic engineer David A. Jokinen, for example, designed a plan to build highways and demolish large parts of historic Amsterdam under the title "Give the City a Chance." The plan blatantly disregarded the historic relation between urban areas and water. In Amsterdam, like in many other cities, such car-focused plans or other large-scale plans led to citizen protests. Municipal police and military police used water cannons during the 1975 riots on the Newmarkt, which started in opposition to the demolition of houses for the construction of a metro. By the 1970s and 80s, citizens started to stand up for the preservation of Amsterdam's historic sites, including vernacular ones. Former port areas, such as Java Island, were redeveloped as small-scale housing near the water. Over time, Amsterdam has emerged as a model in restoration and preservation activities. Recognized as UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2010, the city attracts tourists from around the world. The historical building of the VOC, the Dutch East India Company, and formerly the heart of the Dutch shipping empire, has become a museum. Next to the building, a historic sailboat and the well-known sign, I Amsterdam, are tourist magnets. With the preservation of historic sites as heritage, new actors and stakeholders have emerged. Tourists provide income to the historic cities, which they also change through their presence. New accommodation like Airbnb, which originally promised to make historical cities more accessible, have met with opposition in many cities and have been limited in Amsterdam. Water actors have changed extensively over the centuries, from individual or community practices to national and international organizations. Nowadays, a multitude of stakeholders act upon water and historic buildings and landscapes in different ways, according to a plurality of perspectives and often following different agendas. Some have opposing interests. Water managers may focus on technological and economic interests and want to replace historic structures that no longer serve contemporary needs. Meanwhile, heritage professionals aim to protect and preserve those same structures. Each of their approaches have their own benefits and challenges. As we have seen through the Dutch example, many communities have grown around diverse water practices and they have changed over time. To name just one more fascinating example, water tribunals, such as the Tribunal de los Aigues de Valencia, have long served to settle disputes concerning irrigation water among farmers. In 2009, the Water Tribunal was selected as intangible UNESCO heritage. It may be time to reassess the role of water in the lives of everyday citizens. And to do that, we can revisit and learn from historical water practices. Let's think about the historic water practices in your region. Who are the stakeholders, taking into account local, national, and international players, and the different tools and agencies that they have?